All right, you guys. Hello. I hope you found the new link for the new stream. Um, Hopefully we don't have the echo issues that we have. I apologize. First world problems. I have no control of the internet. But welcome to another live stream edition, although very rocky start to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Thank you guys for coming back to this new stream. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties. I'm glad you guys are hopping back in here. Before we get started, of course, I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We had a bunch of chats going. We had about 50, 60 people in the chat and in the conversation before this conversation got started, which is a record for us. That's a hell of a way to start the show. So thank you to everyone who's been here so far. I want to say... don't forget to like the channel, subscribe, obviously, ring the bell. That way you don't miss any live stream interviews like this with people like Mick West. Tonight we're interviewing the Undead Gaucho as well. So we got 2 shows tonight. And this is going to be the new norm for the channel. All of the edited shows, I think, are going to go away. And we're just going to be doing live streams because people are coming on the show. They're agreeing to come talk to us, have fun. Let's try and be as open-minded as possible. And have a fun conversation. So also ringing the bell will remind you of the big phone home, which is Saturday, April 24th, 2021 at 10 a.m. We're going to be doing a live stream from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday with co-host Michael Mataluni from the debrief.org. We have a killer lineup of guests coming from the SCU, trying to convince our guest today. Maybe he'll stop by. We've got just a ton of people that are going to come by, talk about activism, talk about UAPs, talk about what we could do to get some more information, more data, more transparency on this topic, and hopefully some more answers for everyone. So without further ado, let me bring on our guest for today. I don't want to say controversial, but he is. Some people absolutely hate him. Some people love him. Some people find value in his work, and some people find no value in his work and find him a little pompous and big-headed and whatever. There are a lot of things about Mick. And look, this comes from people who I respect greatly, who are PhDs who... some of them find a lot of value in his work, but some of them just don't like him and don't want to talk to him and want nothing to do with him. And I'm trying to bring people together on common ground. So hopefully this conversation will open the door for some more people to, take in the information and take the pieces from it that sit well with you and go forward. And we'll dive a little bit more into that and what I mean by that. But without further ado, let us bring on our guest, Mr. Mick West. Hello, sir. How are you? Welcome.
Hello, Lewis. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
for that intro.
For coming aboard, getting weird. Yeah, interesting. Well, I talk a lot, so sometimes things don't make sense. Just stop me and
no worries.
Let's dissect it. So before we get into the UAPs, before we get into the thing that people either love or hate about you, let's talk about you, because when I started looking you up and I started talking to people about you and people were telling me about you and I started looking at your work, the thing that I had no idea was that you helped develop Tony Hawk Pro Skater. And I'm sure you've probably talked about this ad nauseum, but I've never heard the story. So I'd love to know, because I could give you one of my fondest memories ever was discovering that game. It was the first time I had ever left home on a vacation. I was working with a friend. He's like, "Hey man, I used to live in Denver. You want to go snowboarding?" I'm like, "Yeah." So this was December 30th, 1999, right before Y2K. And when I got there, all these guys were living in an apartment and they were all playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater. And I'm like, what is this game? And they told me about it. And then the thing that I found the most addictive part, it was the soundtrack. I was like, it opened up my taste in music tremendously because you had the Dead Kennedys, you had Primus on there. Like, there was some killer bands. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, why does everybody hate this guy so much? He made like, what the hell's going on? How much of a jerk can this guy be if he made one of the most influential video games of all time and a damn good one at that? So let's talk about that. Well, before we get to that, I'm sorry. I wanted to know where you were from, where you were born, where did you grow up, things like that.
Sure. I was born in Yorkshire, in England, in the north of England. Hence my slightly English accent.
Yeah.
And I went to university a long time ago and studied computer science. And then when I left, I got a job in the computer games industry, just doing video games. back then it was just around the time of the transition from 8-bit to 16-bit. So I was doing games on like the Atari ST and the Commodore Amiga and the Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
In the UK.
Systems very fond of my time, especially the Genesis. The Amigo, wasn't big. The Commodore for sure, and the Genesis definitely.
Yeah, Genesis was great. It's a console, so there's great games on it, and they load it straight away. Stick the cartridge in. But yeah, so I did a few games on those platforms, and then got a job in the United States.
And was that job never soft?
No, it wasn't. What was happening was there was lots of growth in the industry at the time, and basically the American companies were poaching people from the UK because there weren't enough, video game programmers in the United States. And I guess the weather's better over there, so young boys spend less time in their bedrooms playing around with their computers. And so, it just turns out that it's easy to get video game programmers from the UK. So a bunch of my friends had gone over already. And one of the companies, they were looking for someone. And so a friend of mine in the United States recommended me, and, a guy sending me a fax or something. And then a few weeks later, I was in the States.
How old were you when that happened? When you moved over?
It's late, I got 26-ish or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty much right after school then.
Yes.
A couple years after. Yeah.
Well, I left university at 21. So yeah, I guess it would have been like 4 or 5 years in the UK industry, and then moved out to the States. And
what was the first town you moved into? Was it Los Angeles or San Francisco?
It was a place called Westlake Village, which is near Thousand Oaks.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Right, past the valley towards Ventura. So it's
closest Studio City out there.
Yeah, it's further along the valley than Studio City. So past. It's
Coldwater Canyon,
near where Kobe Bryant's helicopter crashed.
Yeah,
give you a frame of reference.
That of all things, Mick. That's the thing. That's the frame of reference you want to give me. Good Lord.
His helicopter actually crashed within, I think, about 500 feet of the office I worked in, just in Agoura Hills. Yeah, it actually circled over the office. So I get to see it again on the news when that happened. But anyway, so I moved to the States, got a job at this place called Malibu Interactive, a division of Malibu Comics. Wasn't going very well, and then again, like lots of people were leaving, not because they were being poached this time, but because they were starting their own companies. And that's where the money was. People start their own company, and you end up, in theory, making money. You certainly could do it. And I got approached by a guy called Joel Jewett, who was an accountant at Malibu, and he just wanted to start the company because he thought, it'd be fun, and it's a way of making more money than being an accountant. So that's what happened. We started the company. We did a few games, and over the years, eventually we hit upon Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And, the rest is history.
What was were there any notable games before Pro Skater and that you really enjoyed making?
Well, directly before Pro Skater, we did a game called Apocalypse, which was a PlayStation game, Sega Saturn game as well, starring Bruce Willis fighting the forces of evil.
I think I remember that game.
It was a fun little game to work on. Because what had happened was it was kind of a rescue project for us. The previous developer had completely messed up the game.
Got it.
Activision had already sunk like $2 million into making this game, like buying the rights to Bruce Willis's voice and doing all this motion capture and stuff. And this other company just completely messed it up and made just a turd of a game.
Right.
And we were just luckily kind of between games at the time, having a game cancelled, and the engine we were working on really fit. And so we basically had to do the game in I think 8 to 9 months, and we just went, bam, fun game, just started knocking it out.
Cool.
And
so then how did you I guess what was the first sort of inspiration? Who came up with the idea for, hey, let's make a skateboarding game, let's get Tony Hawk to put his name on it?
Well, it's actually kind of boring. It was Activision's marketing department.
Wow.
Did
they just have Tony Hawk on contract? They're like, hey, we need to make a video game for
this was before they got Tony Hawk. What happened was they thought, what market segments don't have video games, and what are the big market segments? And skateboarding was kind of a bit on the ascendancy back then. The X Games were just kind of taking off, and they said, oh well, we need a skateboarding game. X Games does well, makes a bit of money. It's on MTV, wherever it was on back then. And let's do a prototype. So after we finished off Apocalypse, we did a skateboarding prototype, and they liked it, and so they hired Tony Hawk. He was the most popular person back then. Just did the 900. That was a bit later, but you know, he was in the X Games.
That was his prime, definitely, when that game came out.
Yeah.
So I was hoping you were a skateboarder. You not at all, huh? You don't skateboard?
I have a skateboard
because you have a skateboarder's body, so that's why I was I was like, yeah, he looks like a slender dude who might skateboard, you know.
I look like Tony Hawk because I'm about the same height and build as him, but of course he's vastly more athletic than I am.
Well, did they end up using you for any of the motion capture?
No. I would have been good at the falling over motion capture.
Fair enough.
That was about it.
So that was, I mean, I guess, how big of a moment was that for you in your life? I mean, that's a pretty big success. I mean, that game was a huge success. So
yeah, that was
what
huge.
was, I mean, what kind of doors did that open for you as a professional?
Well, or
did you just retire? It opened the door to retirement.
It opened the door to doing more Tony Hawk games. And if I'd stayed on, it would have opened the door to doing Guitar Hero and Call of Duty versions. But I left after the first 5 Tony Hawk games because I felt like I've done enough.
You've done
Tony
it
Hawk year after year, and I've made some money, and I leave and do other things. And so I did a bit of consulting in various companies. I worked on World Series of Poker game for Nintendo. Did the AI for that. Did a little bit of work on a Spider-Man game, consulting various other games, then writing for a Game Developer magazine. And I kind of liked the writing aspect of things. And so after that, I just kind of started doing a little bit of blogging. And I decided, to start blogging about the stuff I'm interested in. So I kind of randomly get interested in stuff on Wikipedia, and I started blogging about this strange disease called Morgellons disease for a while, which was a bit bizarre. And then I started blogging about chemtrails. It's a conspiracy theory, like that the government is spraying us out of planes. And during that time, I got really into kind of identifying planes and getting really, really good at identifying planes. And I'd also been learning to fly.
Were you blogging about identifying planes?
Well, I was blogging about chemtrails and what happens in chemtrails conspiracy theory. People will post videos and say, look, it's a government spraying plane and it's not a normal plane and blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, well, it kind of looks like an American Airlines plane. And then I would go into Flight Radar 24 and see what plane it was and demonstrate how high it was and where it was going and that it had passengers on and stuff like that. So it's just a thing that cropped up a lot. Then with the chemtrails, you would get things like UFO buzzing chemtrail, because there's all kinds of different people in these communities. Some of them are more extreme than others. So I would be like identifying what this little UFO was that was supposedly buzzing the chemtrails, and it turned out to be the usual suspects, like it was a bird or another plane or a cloud or an insect or something like that. So I kind of, in a way, learned about UFO debunking whilst doing this chemtrail debunking, investigating. It wasn't really debunking because they give you a video or a photo and you're trying to figure out what it shows. So it's an investigation.
Interesting. So then I guess that would be sort of the launching point to how you got into debunking overall.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I had this kind of single issue website, Contrails Science, and people kept bringing up other conspiracy theories because, if you believe one, you quite often believe another one. And the chemtrails is pretty extreme. So if you believe in chemtrails as a conspiracy theory, you're going to believe in these other stuff, like 9/11 was an inside job.
Right.
So I would get people bringing that up, and I'm like, no, this is a chemtrail site. Take that elsewhere. And then eventually I was like, oh, well, maybe we could talk about this. And then I decided to set up a site that just did all of the conspiracy theories.
Right, and that site is Metabunk, right?
That was Metabunk, yes, and still is Metabunk. Cool. And that originally had a very strong, chemtrail bias because that's what I was doing, and all the people who were following me were chemtrailers.
Right.
And so but it just kind of grew from that. I did a lot of 9/11 debunking. There's lots of that, and then you see the topic's going to go in waves. Like it's been 9/11 for a few months. Like recently it's been UFOs.
Right.
But 3 months ago it was all election stuff. You see the front page, and it was just all election conspiracy theories.
Right.
And before that, it would have been something else, just like weird videos or something like that.
What was, I mean, I don't want to stick on 9/11 too long, but what was the one thing about 9/11 that people kept bringing up as a oh, well, if this is true, then this has got to be true, where you saw and you're just like, nah, there's a reasonable explanation for that. Is there anything in mind? Yeah, like they sort of
there's a couple of things that stick out. I mean, one is the Pentagon, and a lot of people think that a plane did not hit the Pentagon and said it was a cruise missile, which is pretty extreme, really, because there was hundreds of eyewitnesses who actually gave testimony, and probably thousands of actual eyewitnesses who saw the plane fly in and hit the Pentagon. And if you go and look at where the Pentagon is and go into the street view, you look around, there's just like it's freeways and office buildings as far as the eye can see. It's not like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of Washington, essentially, on the other side of the river. So it's a pretty extreme theory, and it's an interesting one to look at because it's so extreme. It's kind of on the edge, and people can be convinced because there's just lots of evidence. You can say, well, look at these marks on the wall where the wings hit, and they'll say, like, it melted into the building, and you say, no, it didn't. You can see it hit the wall here, and here's the interior columns where it hit, and here's some of the debris from the plane and stuff like that. So you can actually get into that. But then the other one people bring up is Building 7. They always bring up how it looks like a controlled demolition because it's this little it falls down just like straight down like that. And they say it looks like a controlled demolition, so it must be a controlled demolition. But it also looks like a building where the interior has been weakened by fire and the interior collapsed and then the exterior collapsed. But that's more complicated to explain than the simple answer, which is something you see a lot. People like to get put on a simple explanation for things when it's actually a bit more complicated. And you do actually sometimes have to do mental gymnastics, which is used as a derogatory term for some of the explanations I give because they're a bit complicated. But just because something is a bit complicated, it doesn't mean that it's wrong if it really doesn't introduce new things into the equation. We know that fire makes buildings collapse, and there was a fire there. But we don't know that there was explosives being secretly planted in the building that day. So one is actually simpler than the other, even if it's more complicated to explain.
Was there anything about that day that you looked at and you said to yourself, wow, that's actually pretty difficult to explain? That's pretty curious. And I would like to look into that more. Or did you look at everything and say, no, that's looks pretty logical to me?
I mean, really, the things that are somewhat mysterious, like shrouded in mystery and might need explanation, are exactly how it was planned and exactly where the money came from and exactly who knew what was going on. Who knew in advance that this was going to happen. So those things are mysterious to me. But if you look at in terms of the physics, and in terms of the hijackers hijacking the plane and flying there and the ability that took, that seems all very perfectly reasonable to me. And I've looked into it in great depth. I've done things like, I've flown the planes myself in simulators, the little X-plane simulators on my computer, and replicated the paths to see how difficult it was, and it's nowhere near as difficult as people say it is. And looked into all kinds of things, interesting stuff like metallurgy and the physics of compressive failure of columns and things like that. Fascinating stuff. And I think it's all as basically as is in the government reports, other than the mysterious stuff about Saudi Arabia's involvement and things like that.
Right. I think there's a lot of things in the 9/11 Commission report I believe that don't get answered very well. I would like to see a reopening of it. And I would, but I think really why you start to see a lot of classified things, and especially where the money is I think it was more than anything just a complete lack of digesting and analyzing data that was coming in. Just they completely failed, and instead of owning up to that failure, they'd rather just kind of push it to the side and hope people don't ask too many questions.
It was a communications failure as well between the different
massive communications
FBI, CIA, you know, just
right.
So, and that's something that has been addressed to a degree, but still exists to a degree. But
which is also, you know, I think why it sort of births these conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I think you can point fingers if you really wanted to, like, you know, this guy who's in charge of sending the planes sent them in the wrong direction, and you know he messed up.
Right.
But what are you going to do? You're going to send him to jail? No, you learn from it and you make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right. Okay. Well, I thought, you know, that's an interesting thing. I had no idea that's how you got into the debunking field. So, I guess lately, I mean, since 2017, especially the UFO thing's been going on, right? A lot of more government officials seem to be talking about this. We seem to be getting videos from our government and classified, well, they weren't classified, but they were confirmed to be real anyway, or at least taken by our Navy pilots and planes, things like that. So I guess my first question for you on that aspect is, how certain are you that you're right, that this isn't a phenomena that's not human controlled?
Oh, that's kind of a big question, because it's a complicated question. Like, because what you're talking about there is the phenomena, as if there's just this one thing.
Right. Well, no, I don't think it's just one thing. I think it could be a lot of different things. I don't think anybody has the exact answer. That's my viewpoint, right? So you know, I'm open for it to be anything. I just my thing is I kind of want more data, and I don't think there's enough data on either side of this argument to really definitively say one way or the other that this is.
Wait, you know, again, you said this. I mean, what do you mean by this? Like, there's a lot of different things we're talking about here, and I think often people try to boil it down to one thing. Like, what is this? What is the UAP phenomena? What's going on here? When you know, there are a lot of different things. You know, could it be that some of these cases? Yeah, obviously everybody knows that, you know, most things that are reported as UFOs by the general public, at least, are just, you know, they're crap. They're planes and they're birds and they're lens flare and things like that. You know, you know that if you just go through the MUFON reports and looking at them, the little white dots in the sky that look like birds. But there's some of them where you can't tell what they are. And the question is, the ones where you can't tell what they are, is that an indication of either some other country or this country has developed some kind of amazing technology, or have aliens arrived and are flying around? You know, this is kind of the two general possibilities for interesting explanations for UAPs.
Sure. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that idea is changing a little bit daily. And the idea that this is aliens, I think, of course, that's probably the most popular theory. It's a theory that's been floating around for 60, 70 plus years. But I think as science gets weirder, especially the smaller we get, you know, things, I think that definition, you know, is starting to change, at least the theory, maybe. What do you think of that?
I've seen that. Like, a lot of the people in the UAP community or the UFO community, they don't like to talk about aliens anymore, because they think it delegitimizes their investigations, which, you know, is fair enough. You know, you could say we're just talking about craft that show some extreme maneuverability. You know, these 5 observables that people talk about. And yeah, I mean, that's one way of looking at it, but in a way it's kind of irrelevant, because the real issue for me, which I think is different from the issue that a lot of people in ufology have, the issue for me is, are there actually craft that have the 5 observables, or are we just seeing things that look like they have the 5 observables? Like, for example, if we see a radar blip of something that's here, and then 0.78 seconds later, it's down here, like it's dropped 28,000 feet in less than a second. Does that actually represent a real thing? And some people will say, yeah, we've got so much evidence that it must be real, because we have so many examples of these things that they must be real. And, you know, I kind of disagree. I think if you look at each thing individually, and I know people don't like to do that, like just the fact that you've got a radar blip that goes from here to here doesn't mean there was actually a craft that went from there to there. It means that there was something happened with the radar that did that. It could be a craft, but the implications of that are quite amazing. The implications of it being a radar glitch are not that amazing. And yet people, if I bring up like, the radar was glitching, they say, oh, it's the Spy-1 radar and the Aegis system, and it's amazing, and we spent billions of dollars developing it. No way it could possibly go wrong. And yet they have no problem saying, well, it's a craft that flies at 1,000 Gs, or it's a craft that warps the fabric of space and time and tunnels through the substrate of the universe, as if that is somehow much more likely than an expensive radar system having an occasional glitch.
Right. No, I could understand that. So then let me ask you this. Do you think there is any sort of, we'll just call it a vehicle, that can actually do one or more of those 5 observables?
Well, I mean, one of them is pretty boring, which is the transmedium travel, and we have things like patents for flying submarines. But when people talk about transmedium travel, they're really talking about high-speed transmedium travel, and they're talking about some kind of tunneling through the water, either sonic tunneling or space warp tunneling. So if you're going to that extreme, like I think arguably you can say some of the 5 observables exist because they don't put numbers on them. They just say like, it's extremely rapid.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think there is a vehicle in the United States military's inventory or anyone's else's inventory that has the capability of doing high speeds, let's just say a couple 100 miles per hour underwater through and then, able to submerge from out of water, go into our atmosphere and possibly into space? We're talking about 3 different
I think probably
levels of
not. I think, you're talking there about things that are on the verge of possibility. 200 miles an hour underwater, I don't know. That sounds like something that's possible with a small craft with cavitation. And then converting it into a flying thing, maybe that's possible. But if we start talking about 1,000 miles an hour underwater, then no, I don't think that exists, because it would require some kind of vast new understanding of physics, which there's no indication that we have. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't really see any good evidence of it happening. And really, the underwater stuff is very shrouded in water, because it's underwater and it's hard to see things underwater. So you just get these very vague accounts of it, like someone talking about sonar. You get far less than the things that are in the air, supposedly. So I think it's better to actually look at the things that are in the air as examples of these 5 observables, or the other 4 observables, if we discount this transmedium one.
Okay, well, let's take transmedium out of it because you're not a fan. What is God, I just forgot the question I was going to ask you. Okay, so going back to the Spy-1 radar system, which is a very advanced radar system. I mean, this thing has the capability of tracking something the size of a baseball 60,000 feet in the sky. And it does it on a 3-dimensional plane, in conjunction with submarines and other ships. When that radar blip is also confirmed by, say, pilots, then where do you go there as a debunker?
Well, that would be great if you had a solid confirmation. But you're talking there about the encounter of David Fravor, and to a certain degree the encounter with Chad Underwood, where they were both given some kind of vector. Now, Fravor's encounter is interesting. You talked about it being able to detect a baseball at 60,000 feet, and presumably many, many miles away. And yet, when Fravor's plane got to where the UFO supposedly was, they couldn't distinguish between the UFO and Fravor's plane on this amazing radar. This thing called merge plot, which maybe just like the way it's visually on screen, like it just looks like one thing, but surely you'll be able to tell where one thing is and where the other thing is by clicking on them or zooming in on that bit. Is the Spy-1 really that amazing? When Fravor got there, he was expecting to find something at 28,000 feet, and he got there and nothing was there. Now, if you look at the official report, one of the things that was written around that time, they talk about discovering this disturbance in the water 5 nautical miles away from there. which is, it's different to like the accounts that came later, but it's also an account that was written closer to the time. So is flying somewhere and then seeing something 5 miles away really corroborating the evidence of the radar, or is it just a coincidence? Coincidences do actually happen, and sometimes multiple coincidences actually happen. So the fact that he flew somewhere and then had this encounter because he was told to fly there because there were these radar returns, it might mean something, it might not. It's really hard to say. And
well, then is it safe to say then, as a pilot, when he got there and he realized that either A, the radar is incorrect, or B, the radar can't decipher the difference between the two objects? I mean, either the object was there, and when they got there, it was. I'm getting a little confused because it's the radar saying it's there. Fravor gets there, and then the radar point and the jet of Fravor combine into one thing, and the radar can't tell the difference between the two.
But why wouldn't it be able to do that if it was at, if it was down by the sea level? If it went down to the sea, I suppose it might not be able to steer because it's over the horizon.
Right.
But it's at that point, it's miles away from him. He's at 28,000 feet. That's what is that? That's like over 5 miles in the sky.
Right.
So there's something 5 miles beneath him, and yet they still can't distinguish between the two things. The things that were 5 miles apart. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't make sense. It's a crazy story. The entire story is pretty wild. Okay, so Fravor gets there, nothing's there, so then he sees a disturbance 5 miles away, and so he flies to that disturbance.
Stories vary.
Okay.
Like there's Fravor's account, and there's the account that he gave to the Fighter Suite magazine. And then there's the one written by Source, which is the female co-pilot, and she was up above him. They actually came in about the same, and then he went down and she stayed up. And then there's this official report that was compiled from interviews with pilots, apparently, and there's different opinions about how official it is, but I think people have said it was actually a real report. And then there's another one which is a kind of a more official report, which is an actual kind of almost like a log entry type thing, which shows a few things, and that doesn't really corroborate the story that much either. I think that's the one that says it's 5 miles away.
So let me ask you, with reports, and I think it's the same thing with Twitter, and this is something that I'm hoping to maybe encourage people to stop doing, and that's talking past each other, losing things in context in text. It's very, very easy to do on Twitter. I think that's why people get very frustrated with you sometimes, because you'll say something and it's, it's very straightforward and it comes off as snarky. And I think also, a British accent for some reason, I think just gives people this, this feeling that, oh, he's talking down to me or he's being a jerk, and
how dare you, sir?
How dare you? Exactly. Slap you across the face with a glove. It's so that's why I think people get lost in translation, especially when it comes to cock and text. So when it comes to reports, how often do you think things like that happen? Because when I think of David Fravor, the first thing that comes to mind when I take his story into account is a 3.5, almost 4 hour discussion he has with Lex Fridman. And to me, I think that's sort of the thing I go to, because that is his verbal account, his best recollection of the events that happened. And I think it's pretty damn compelling. And you're going, right? So I want to know why you don't think that was a compelling conversation, because I'm going to give you my reasons why.
Okay.
I think, this is almost a 4 hour conversation. And I think 2 hours and 45 minutes of this conversation was prefacing this UFO story with his career and how he got into that pilot seat. And there was a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot of hard work. And to be honest, there was a lot of luck and there was a lot of skill to get into that seat. You yourself said that you were training to be a pilot. How long did you do that for?
About a year. Well, maybe not that long. I can't remember exactly. Less than a year.
How many hours of flying did you get in?
Like 70, I think. No, 50. I can't remember now.
Can I ask you why did you stop? It doesn't have to be accurate. 70 hours.
No,
That's fine.
yeah, I was going to whip out my logbook and show it to you to prove that but I can't.
No, Mick, I believe you.
Yeah, I know. I just like.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I had a buddy
right,
who just sent me video of his first solo flight. So
yeah,
I know what
got
an
a video of my
accomplishment.
flights.
Like,
but yeah, so
it's a big deal.
I got as far as doing my long distance solo, which means that you fly by yourself.
The long distance. Yeah.
So I flew, I think, to Bakersfield from Los Angeles and back again via somewhere else, which was a tedious long flight.
Yeah.
And that was the longest flight I did. And I did a few solo flights after that. And then I took my wife up in the plane, and she hated it. She really didn't like it at all. So,
well, I'm sure, especially on your first, like you only got 70 hours under your belt.
It's a small plane. It's a Piper.
Yeah, no, it's a Cessna. I mean, my buddy asked me to go on the plane. I was like,
Piper, but
it's
like rattling around. It's really noisy.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
She didn't like it, and I took my mother up as well. That was quite a harrowing flight. She came to visit, and we flew around down to Long Beach over the Queen Mary and stuff like that. The tourist flight. You come back up over Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
And she was just, nerve-wracked. I took my sister up when she came to visit, and she threw up in the back seat of the plane.
Oh,
she didn't mention it until after we landed. And luckily there was a sick bag in the back.
Oh, okay, good. I'm thinking she just puked all over the back of the plane.
So anyway, after that, I kind of lost interest because it didn't look like it was going to be this fun thing that I would do with my friends and family.
Right. They're just terrified while you're having a good time.
Yeah, I did it in part because it was a childhood dream of mine. One of the set of books I read when I was young was not Roald Dahl, Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He also wrote a number of books about flying. And I just love those books, and so I wanted to learn to fly. And when I left Neversoft, I said, I'm going to learn to fly. I got the money. I'm going to do it, and I did it. And then it wasn't that great, so I stopped.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, I could understand why your entire surrounding family was like, "Can you just stop this, please? It's terrifying." I know you're having a great time, but please stop. I'm sorry, you were gonna say?
No, I got motion sick as well. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, did that happen while you were flying alone?
It not so much. It does though that when you're with an instructor, and if you're not in control of the plane, then it was terrible. Skills. So multiple reasons. But we're kind of getting off the interesting topic of UAPs and UFOs.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm glad that I heard that story. But yeah, so going back to Fravor, and that long conversation and sort of how he ended up in that cockpit seat. So when I think, is it fair to say that when it comes to flying planes, you are, I like to compare things to sports, right? You are I'm
a little league, and
you're a little league basketball player,
Kiwis or something.
And like little league baseball, and he's like a Michael Jordan, but let's say a Scottie Pippen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he's a vastly better pilot than me.
So how do you justify? In your head, like walk me through the process of listening to that.
Right.
Those pre-qualifications, the story where he grew up. Sort of getting a feeling of who this person is and the motivations as to why they would even say something like this.
I have an answer.
Yeah, please.
I think he is a fighter pilot, and a really, really good one. Amazing fighter pilot. Been doing it for a really, really long time. Lots of experience. He can do things that in his sleep that I can't even dream about. If you dropped me in the plane in the same situation, I would probably just crash straight into the ocean because I had no idea what I was doing, and I wouldn't be able to tell where I was and which way I was up because of what was going on. So if you're comparing like him doing stuff in a plane to me doing stuff in a plane, there's no contest. And observation wise, looking at things and like spotting, like a plane that's in the distance and identifying that plane, that's also no contest. He'd be way better than me. And even if we're in the same situation and there's a 20-foot tic tac 2 miles away and we're both looking at it, he's probably better at spatially understanding where it is than I am. I would probably have not a good comprehension of what I'm seeing either. But take me out of the picture entirely for a second. And think about Commander David Fravor by himself in this plane is this amazing person. He's got all this experience, years of experience, I think 15 years, I think he said, as a fighter pilot. And he sees this tic-tac shaped object, and it's, say 20 feet long. And he looks at it and he makes the mistake of thinking that it's 40 feet long. Why can't he make that mistake? Just because he has all these years of experience, he has no experience at all of judging the size of a tic-tac that is completely without context, something he's never, ever seen flying before. The only things he's seen flying before, they're all pretty much the same size. They're the size of a Hornet, an FA-18, which is about 40 feet long. So he thinks, well, that's about the same size as that. So it's 40 feet long, but in fact, it's 20 feet long. He could make that mistake. Even though he's an expert, he's not an expert in this one thing, in identifying things he has never seen before in the air. He's an expert identifying things of the type of things he's seen before, like planes and drones and missiles and clouds and birds. He knows exactly how to do all those, but this one thing is completely featureless. It's like, it looks like this. How big is this thing? Because my hand has some reference, but if it was just hovering in the air and it was at this distance, you wouldn't know how big it was because you have no frame of reference. So just because he is 1,000 times better a pilot than me, it doesn't mean that he can't make a mistake. I wouldn't know how big this thing was.
Sure. But that's like judging Michael Jordan his whole career because he missed free throws.
I'm not judging the rest of his career. I'm judging this one thing where he, I think, may have misidentified the size and hence distance and hence speed of one particular object this one time. His 15 years of incredible career, amazing. It's superlative. He was on that documentary about the carrier, and he had led the squadron, retired with honors, and now he's getting the bucks in the private sector. He's a very accomplished guy who's vastly more talented in that sphere than I am. But that doesn't mean that he can never, ever, ever make a mistake.
Sure.
Just because I'm a pile of crap when it comes to flying, it doesn't mean that he gets everything right and I get everything wrong. He might get something wrong, and he might continue to get it wrong years later.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: percentage-wise, give me percentage. How wrong do you think he is on this account?
Maybe 50. I don't know. It's hard
50.
To
say. So 50-50. So you think he's just it's a mistaken identity.
That was a little joke. I say 50 because my leading hypothesis for why he thought that this object moved in a hypersonic way was that he thought it was 40 feet long when it was actually 20 feet long.
Okay.
So it's a 50% wrongness. Half as big, or twice as big, depending on which way you're looking at it. But so it's that thing. If something is here, or if something is here and was twice as big, they would look the same on the screen. And if you thought something was, say, 2 miles away, and you were flying around, but it was actually 1 mile away, and you're actually flying around it in a circle, it would look like it was something 2 miles away following you. It would look exactly like that it was.
How do you know that?
How do I know what I just said?
How do you know that is what he saw?
I don't know what he saw. But this is my leading hypothesis for what.
But I mean, because that's the leading, And so when you throw that hypothesis, how, again, like let's just say this is UAP Vegas. Would you put your money on your hypothesis being right, or would you put your money on your hypothesis possibly being wrong?
I would put my money.
I guess the reason why I'm asking this question. Okay, go.
I put my money on it not being a craft that exhibited acceleration to hyperspeed.
Okay, so what do you think he saw?
This is a number of possibilities. One of which is that it's some kind of fancy drone that did move fairly fast. Maybe it could move like 200 miles an hour or something like that. There are drones that can fly that fast. It could be in a rocket-powered drone. I don't know. Seems unlikely that they would be testing out some kind of drone there, but maybe it happened. Maybe it didn't. Could it be like Chinese drone? I mean, that was quite a long time ago. I don't know if China had the technology back then, but I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out. it could have been something as simple as like a target balloon. You have these target balloons that they use to shoot at from the ships and the guns on the island and things like that when they're practicing, target practice or sighting, or they do things where they fly around these balloons. If one of those got loose, and maybe it was some kind of big blimp type balloon that was like 20 feet long, maybe that was just kind of floating around in the air, and he didn't recognize how big it was, and he had this big illusion of it being big and far away when it was actually small and close. Maybe that happened. But I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, this is probably going to be the first time I'm going to push back hard. I can't buy it, only because of, sure, maybe he is, he's not 100% sure at the size of the thing he's looking at, right? Is it 20 feet? Is it 40 feet? And I think flying at those speeds, sometimes, maybe you calculate those things incorrectly. But I think it's very fair to say that based off of, the thousands, I'm sure, of hours flying and things that he's encountered in the skies while flying. And, he's told stories about how, that it demonstrate how good his vision is, especially when looking through some of these fancy, expensive helmets. Let me
push back on your pushback here. I hear what you're saying. Like, he's a great guy, a wonderful, highly talented person. Like, how could he possibly make that mistake? But I'm just saying,
with the Rolodex of all of the things in his head, like, how can he confuse a targeting balloon with something that's moving at what he describes, immense breakneck speeds?
So what I'm suggesting is that it was a featureless object. Where he couldn't recognize what it was. If you got something that's featureless, now you know exactly how big this is because my hand is holding it. But if it's just hovering in midair, how would you be able to tell how big it was if you didn't know where it was? Like, here it's this size, and there it's this size, and back here is tiny.
Yeah, but
isn't it fair to know how far away it is?
Let me just say this: isn't it fair to say though that anything farther than 20, 30,000 feet is featureless? Like, I could look at a car, a couple hundred yards down the road, and you can pick up some features, but you can't pick up the lines and the details of that car from that far away.
If you at an extreme case, you can look at a Learjet at 40,000 feet, and you can just about make out the shape of it. 40,000 feet is a lot further than what we're talking about here. Look at a plane at 30,000 feet. You can easily see the shape of that plane. Look at a fighter jet at 30,000 feet. You can make out that it's
I'm not disputing the shape of those things. When I think of features, you say featureless. I mean, you can't see an engine, you can't see a cockpit, you can't see wings.
All right, ignore the featureless thing. Just the fact is that it looked like it was this shape. And all you can see is this caplet shape, this kind of sausage shape or tic tac shape. You don't really have any frame of reference other than just the type of shape it is. Like, if it was like an actual like a fighter plane, you would see it was kind of a more delta shape than a regular plane, which has the longer wings, and you can vaguely be able to distinguish, how big it was based on that. But you have no frame of reference at all of this. All you know is that it's like probably more than a mile away because it's not like out of focus when you look at it and things like that, but you don't know anything about it. So it's possible to misjudge its size. So the question is, how did he determine how far away it was? And he was asked this on Friedman's show. And it's something I talked about in my rebuttal video, but he was asked, how do you know you didn't make a mistake about determining how far away this thing was or how big it was? I can't remember exactly what Lex said, but something like that. He was asked that. And Fravor replied, 15 years of experience. And that was pretty much the entirety of his explanation.
But what's wrong with that answer? I just don't understand. Why is that a bullshit answer? Why is he not allowed to answer a very simple question in his world, in his job? Determining those distances and those things is something he does all the time. And if the size of it is off by 10 feet, what the hell does that matter? Why?
That's a lot.
How? Why? Explain why.
For the reason I just kind of explained earlier. If something is, if you got a factor of 2 in your miss scale of things, like it's 20 feet versus 40 feet, then if it's in the middle of the circle versus the other side of the circle, completely different. If it's in the middle of the circle, it doesn't have to move at all. It could just be floating there like a balloon, and you're flying around it, and you think it's flying around you. There's actually graphics that people have done showing what happens, and they show an exact mirroring. It comes down, it does this, and then it does this.
But that doesn't explain the other two pilots flying above him, confirming what he's doing below them.
The thing is, they don't confirm what he did.
But they did
not match exactly.
I mean, but
no, they don't. Take the accounts, put them side by side, try to line them up with the events when they happened. Like take the start event. Source, the female pilot, let's call her Source, describes it moving very fast in a straight line. Fravor describes it as zigzagging. Those were two completely different things.
I also know of her confirming the movements that Fravor did around this object and how it mirrored him from a completely different angle, you know, and she also said that this event pissed her off because she was sent out into a place without a way to defend herself. So, which tells me she was scared. First of all, she's scared to tell the story because she doesn't want anybody to know her name or what her face looks like. So I guess we can go on this semantics all day because, and I'm going to defer to you on this because I don't want to say you're smarter than me, but you've looked at this a lot longer than I have, and you really have sort of dived into it. So I'm not gonna, I mean, again, I'm not trying to be a believer here. Okay. Well, I'm just trying to lean on experts and what they say.
Let's lean on what Fravor said as an expert. Right after he was asked that about how he knew, he was asked how often do your eyes deceive you? I can't remember the exact question, something along those lines. And he was like, oh, well, they deceive you all the time. And then he says, well, we're actually trained not to use our eyes to determine things, but instead use the instruments. And then he went on to describe a whole bunch of illusions that people fall for. I think there's the vestibular illusion where you feel like you're tilting and things like that. And he was showing basically all the ways that people can mess up.
Right.
And yet he was saying before that because of his 15 years of experience, he could just eyeball it. But what I want to know is, like, what does that actually involve? You look at something and it feels like it's 40 feet long. But how did he? How? What's going on there? It's completely featureless. He's never seen it before.
Yeah.
How does he do it?
I think he's leaning on
just a badass
on his 15 years experience. Yeah, he is a badass.
So
but
incapable of making mistakes.
No, not incapable of making mistakes. I think he would say, I don't even think we hear this story. Okay. If that other pilot and the other Wizzo and the other plane don't confirm at least part of his story. And also, I don't think we hear this story if there wasn't video attached to it, if there wasn't cockpit recordings attached to these things. I just don't understand what is, with a man of this kind of expertise,
godlike abilities.
Okay, no, I don't want. No, you keep extending him to this godlike that can't make mistakes. That's not what I'm saying.
Infallible.
No. That's not what I'm saying. Not what I'm saying whatsoever. I'm not saying he's nearly infallible. My question to you is, if he thought that this was a mistake, that it was one of these illusions that he spoke about, why would he talk about this story? If he had any doubt in his brain whatsoever,
I don't think he has any doubt. He
doesn't have. So what's? I guess why would he do this? Even if he didn't have any doubt,
he thinks he saw it. He thinks that it was a real thing, and he thinks that he saw it, and so he's just telling the story because it's an interesting story. He didn't seem too concerned about it. The fact that he saw something that might be like an incredible anti-gravity drone or some kind of alien spaceship, he seems rather indifferent to the whole thing. But
I mean,
he thinks that it happened. Yeah. Apparently.
Well, to address the indifference, I think that the explanation of what happened when he got back onto the plane is why that indifference is there, because you have this very God, what's the word I'm looking for? Environment. okay, where it's very brochacho, okay? Everybody's always busting balls on a ship and in the Navy. And if anybody comes back to the plane with one of these stories, you bet your ass you're going to get your balls busted. And it's not something that you're going to push for and talk about and make a big deal and scream and say, hey, look at me.
You know, he's not a wuss. He's not like...
Yeah, no, he's not a wuss, but I think that's why the indifference is there.
He's the commander of the squadron. You know? Right. He's not a guy who's going to be like,
but you know, I'm telling you,
I'm not going to talk about it. He's like he's a badass. So he would talk about it. I don't think he did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, you know, he's so cool about it. And he's so even keeled about it because he's got that humor for it that he can say, hey, look, I'm okay with saying I have no idea what I chased and saw and confirmed on radar and my other co-pilot saw. You know, like I've got no qualms about it because I'm comfortable enough in my ability and my skills to talk about this and not be afraid of being ridiculed by a Mick West.
He's a cool dude. You know, he doesn't lose his cool. So which is probably a good thing to have when you're a fighter pilot. You don't want to like crack under pressure. And I think that comes across. And he's able to talk about it calmly when, you know, in some ways it's a pretty amazing story and perhaps you shouldn't be so calm about it, but I don't know.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, you know, and that's, I think the way you ended that is true for anything. Nobody knows, right? We don't know.
We don't know, no. And we may never know with the Fravor thing. Because,
well, let me ask you this. What would have to come out? Or let's say what person, what highlight, what title does one have to hold for Mick West to say, oh shit, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I need to pay attention to this in a different way.
Fighter pilot would be great. What I would like to see, what I would like to see actually is all four of the people who were there, 2 pilots, 2 Wizzos, give their accounts of what happened exactly. Draw diagrams with numbers, you know, how big they thought it was, how far away it was, how fast it was going, where they were, what the actual sequence of events was, what time it was. And Fravor talks about making diagrams like that. It's something they're all trained to do. Because they remember what the turns they took and what they did. Because you have to pay attention when you're in a plane and you're thinking about the maneuver you're making and how many degrees it is and things like that. So they're trained to do this. So they should have all been able to do this. And it's very curious to me that there's no diagrams at all that came out of this. You'd think someone would have drawn a chart of what went on. Instead, we just get these verbal descriptions. In some detail from Fravor, he talks about this clock thing that he does, and Source does a little bit of that, but the other two, nothing.
Well, let me ask you, when you say a diagram, do you mean, would you like to see David Fravor draw that on a piece of paper, or would you like to see someone animate the movements exactly of both?
Well, I'd like to see Fravor draw it on a piece of paper first, and then eventually we could do a recreation of what happened. To try to figure out, you know, based on what he says. Like if he says, like, you know, he's doing this, and I'm up here, and then you know it comes up, and I'm coming down, and it goes around, and I go around. What actual path explains what he remembers seeing? And independently of that, Source and her Wizzo asked them to do the same thing from their perspective, because having 2 different perspectives is really important.
Sure. Yeah.
But you've got to have actual data from those 2 perspectives. You can't just have a general description of like, oh, it was moving really fast and it tumbled in strange angles, things like that. You know, you can't just use
I mean,
terms like that.
To be fair, I don't think I've heard, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask him that question. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you recreate the flight path on this day and at least help us maybe recreate the flight path?
Why wouldn't he have done that? I mean, it seems like,
I mean, you know, hey, man, I agree with you 100%. But, you know, I think, you know, when you're doing productions, when you're taping people, of course, you know, there's time limits, there's things like that. And
there's a point. Source had an interview, I believe, with Lou Elizondo, and that's the whole Source document. And it says in that document, Source drew a diagram. Where is that diagram? What happened to it? Why can't we see that diagram? It's not classified, is it? I mean,
well, did you ask anybody for it?
No, I haven't. But you think if it existed, why isn't it being brought forward?
Maybe the editor didn't want to put it in the magazine. There could be a
Yeah,
million reasons,
I was
All
going
I'm
to ask
saying,
Lou about it, but the
yeah.
interview only ran an hour, and he doesn't want to come back on again now, so I can't ask him. But if you talk to Lou Elizondo, ask him about that diagram.
I mean,
Source
yeah.
to a
I mean,
diagram. Where is it?
he's been on the show. I'd be more than happy to ask him if he ever comes
Well, just
back.
contact him. Ask him.
Well, I mean, we could also we don't have to ask him. We could ask whoever wrote the article, because if that diagram exists and they wrote it for the editor and the writer of that
It wasn't an article. That was the To the Stars Academy interview.
Oh, I thought you said it was a Salon article. Or maybe I misheard you. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about source.
Source. Got it. Yeah. Okay, I thought that was an artitle or a magazine of some kind.
No, source is the name that's given to the female wingman.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Well, couldn't hurt to ask.
But in general, more that all I want is data to correlate things from two different perspectives, because essentially it's triangulation. If you can get things from two perspectives and it works out, then that means that they actually saw these movements. But if all you've got is like, it moved really fast, and like, oh yeah, it moved really fast, from a different angle, then it's hard to say. Well, perhaps they both had a parallax illusion.
Yeah. This is a pretty good question, I guess. If you did get that diagram, and let's say the diagram is very close to what Fravor says, right? And also the diagram from the other pilot, the source, is also matching what the story says.
Yeah.
Would you then find a flaw with a diagram that was wrong? Well, this is hand drawn. How accurate could it be?
I'm not setting out to find flaws in things. Yeah. I'm setting out to figure out what happened.
Right. No,
I'm trying to figure out what actually fits the evidence. And so if the evidence suggests that it was some kind of zigzagging hyperspace hypersonic tic-tac, then I would go with that. But I think we need better evidence than we have right now. And it's unfortunate now. When was it? 2004. That's 17 years ago. I really don't think that even if people drew a diagram now,
how accurate could it be?
You could really consider that to be good evidence, because so much time has passed, and trying to remember the intricacies of what something looked like and how it moved 17 years later, I think it's not going to work, and we really needed to do it back then, because memory starts to change quickly.
I agree with you. I think you're right. I think more data is key. I think the tricky part of this, though, and somebody brought this to my attention, and I kind of agree with it. And, like, for example, the new footage that just came out, the footage that you've been recreating and the Broca and all that. But before we get to that, totally lost my train of thought. This happens at least once a show.
It happens to me.
Yeah.
Getting old.
Senior
moments.
Anyway, gosh, I can't believe I totally forgot what I was going to say. Hate when that happens. Anyway, let's move on to this new thing. The point is that I agree with you. I think we need more data. Okay. I think we need, okay. This is what I was going to say. It's tough because, those videos weren't classified, right? Those were available online for years. And when I say videos, I mean the Tic Tac, the Nimitz, the Go Fast.
Well, they weren't available before 2017, except for the Nimitz one.
Well, they were floating around on one of these websites, I can't remember.
Only the FLIR one from the Nimitz. The other two didn't come out until Mellon winkled them out of the Pentagon.
Yeah, you are correct on that. But my point is being that, the reason why I think we were able to hear those stories with those videos and it took 15 to 20 years to come out is because none of those people that are involved in that story anymore are active service members. They're all pretty much retired. So to talk about it now,
retired. She's still in the service.
Source isn't, but other than that, for the most part, everyone in that story is no longer an active duty member. And so it's easier for them to talk about it. And unfortunately, it's 15 years after the fact, and it's really hard to sort of grab all the facts that are floating around there because, like you said, the time has passed, so it's a little more difficult. Now, the thing with this newer video is that this is from 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's, I think we're sort of running into some of the same issues. I personally, I think the Nimitz and the Tic Tac footage and all of those things are, to me, a lot better data to look at and sort of, I don't want to say hold up as proof, but just point out and say, okay, well, this is very interesting. This is something to look at. With this newer stuff that's coming out, it's fascinating. I like that it's got some confirmation from the Navy, but there are holes to it. We don't have a David Fravor that is accompanying this video. We don't have any radar tracking, footage or stories or data points. So this one is just video, some pictures, and a story that accompanies with it. And the Navy has confirmed that yes, this video is ours. It doesn't say if it's. They never once call it a UAP. They call it a drone. They only refer to it as drones throughout the whole thing. So that's another thing that sort of makes me sort of sit back and just say, I think we need more information on this. How do you feel?
It's a very interesting, like why this particular video came out. I mean, it's kind of weird. I don't really understand what happened there. I guess it can't be classified, so it must be unclassified. Otherwise, there'd be trouble. So we've got an unclassified video of supposedly a triangular-shaped drone. And obviously, I don't think it's a triangular-shaped drone. I think it's bokeh. It's a camera artifact. But how did that get out? And not just how did it get out, but why was it in the UAP task force's presentations anyway? And this UAP task force, what's his name? Knapp. George Knapp. George Knapp said on Coast to Coast recently the UAP task force is just one guy with no budget. So what's going on there? I mean, it's one guy with no budget holds a presentation for some people, and it gives, like, here's an iPhone video that some guy shot through his thermal vision monocular. No, it's thermal vision. It's night vision monocular. And it shows some kind of UAP, but there's no context of what's actually happening here in terms of investigations or provenance for the video, or what people thought at the time that it showed, or how long they were confused about what it shows, or whether they think now that it's unidentified. And on top of that, there's obviously this huge amount of evidence that's come out recently from just other examples that it's not actually a flying triangle or a flying pyramid. It just looks like the bokeh, or the bokeh, pronounced like okay, bokeh of the camera. And this is something that's been replicated now. We found night vision cameras that have this exact triangular aperture inside. And when you take pictures of things like stars and planes and lights, they form this exact same triangle shape. It's even got a little slight curve on the outside. Or you can do things like you can tape up the lens cap or something and have a triangular shape aperture and take pictures through that, and it shows the same thing. People have taken their what was it, a PVS 17 night vision monocular and put a bit of tape on the end of it in a triangle shape, and it produces exactly the same highlights. So it seems fairly obvious that's what's going on. So we've got a video of something that really doesn't seem to show anything. It might show drones, maybe that's a drone flying over. But to me, the flashing of the lights looks more like it's just a high altitude plane flying over. And then you look at where was the Russell, the USS Russell at that time. And it was a bit off San Clemente, and it was exactly in line with the incoming flight path to Long Beach, John Wayne Airport, and LAX, coming in, the bottom side of the inbound Pacific track. And so it would have seen these planes flying directly overhead. And when a plane is flying directly overhead, it looks like it's hovering at first. It looks like it's hovering in the distance for a long time. And then it kind of moves up and away over you, or it moves up and over to the side. like that. And these are illusions that have happened many, many times. And I see
well, that's happened to me where I'm looking at something for a while. I'm like, what the hell is that thing?
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself, okay, just relax. Let's wait a couple minutes. Let's see if it turns, if something happens. And then eventually something happens where it's like, oh, it's a blimp or it's a helicopter or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree there. I think, can I be honest with you? My first thought when I saw the videos in the report was Mick West is going to have a field day with this. Mick West is going to have a field day with this, and I don't know if that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I'm not saying that as a derogatory statement, because I'm waiting for that evidence that makes you go, shit. You know, how am I going to, I'm just waiting for the data and the evidence. And that's why I'm doing this big phone home, you know, like, that's why I'm trying to contact local and state representatives to get more data for folks like you, because I want you to tear it apart. I want you to come back with, this is what I think it is. I wish sometimes you were a little nicer about it, you know, because I'll be honest with you, man, I think you're useful, but I think sometimes you do come off a little pompous and a little rude, you know. It's just like, I wish sometimes I wish that you would give a little bit more of, a leeway to a Commander David Fravor, because he's not just some guy in the backwoods, you know. And yes, he's prone to make mistakes. He's human. We all are. I agree with that. I'm not going to argue.
He can take it though. It's not like he's getting all offended. And,
no.
Like,
he's not getting
hurt my feelings.
He's not getting offended.
He's a badass. He doesn't mind.
I'm more concerned of the folks that I want to listen to you more. That's all. I want more folks to really start engaging with you more, because I think, and this is why I wanted to get personal with you first, because I want people to understand that, you know, Mick West is a human being. But also, with that said, Mick West is also prone to make mistakes, just like any human being, right? Look at his face. No way. So, you know, that's why I wanted to have the conversation with you, because I want to get, you know, a sort of a feeling of how sure you are about this.
Yeah, no, how sure am I? I mean, like, we started out kind of arguing about this question about, you know, what is the phenomena, and I'd say that I'm fairly sure that I haven't seen good evidence that there is some kind of amazing technology out there.
Yeah.
So aliens to the side, any kind of amazing hypersonic accelerating craft or transmedium, or I can't remember what the other observables are, like funny shapes or something like that. I don't think there's really good evidence of that. There's suggestive evidence, but there isn't good evidence, and there certainly isn't conclusive evidence. And there's so much evidence that I've looked into that turns out to be very poor evidence, like this Boca thing, and, like, you know, the Chilean case before, and even to an extent the 3 Navy videos. They all turned out to be less than they were sold to be. You look into all these things so much, and it all turns out to be mush. It kind of makes you feel that it's all mush, because there aren't any good compelling cases. There aren't any good compelling pieces of evidence.
Well, I've seen. I mean, look, obviously we're gonna disagree on those 3 videos. I think those are pretty damn good pieces. I wouldn't say of evidence, but they're I always look at the motivation. You know, why release these things? Why embarrass a pilot, and why put his entire career at jeopardy just to tell this crazy story?
Got them out,
right? But
well,
you know what I'm saying. You know what when I say release them, I'm saying when they became public. You know, that's what I mean.
Already public.
But when they were public, but nobody knew about them until somebody reported on them.
Elizondo release them is really the question we should be asking.
What's your hypothesis there?
How and why? Well, they were working at To the Stars Academy, which is an entertainment company that wants to popularize UFOs, partly because the people who work there believe that UFOs are aliens, and they want to get this information out to the general public. And so they thought that if we can give the general public some good video evidence of amazing technology, which could not possibly be human, or this is some very advanced human technology, that will further our cause of To the Stars Academy and their own personal causes, because they all seem personally, genuinely driven to promote this disclosure type thing. You know, Elizondo's seems to believe it. And Mellon, I think Mellon definitely believes it too. And so they're doing what they think is right in terms of pushing for disclosure. So that's why they released it. They didn't really care about the pilots, and the pilots were anonymous, so it wasn't really a big deal.
Do you think that's their motivation? Is they're trying to do the right thing?
To a large degree, yes. I tend to. This may be a failing on my part. I tend to think the best of people.
Yeah.
If you look at
wait, what? I'm kidding. I'm just busting your chops.
Like Mellon seems like a lovely guy.
Yeah,
and he's a super rich guy. He's worth like over $100 million, and so he doesn't need to make money from shitty little documentaries on the History Channel. No offense, History Channel.
Mm-hmm.
He's already got the money. What he's wanting to do is, further the cause of humanity by disclosing alien technology or the advanced technology or whatever he thinks is there. Mm-hmm. And Elizondo, I don't know exactly. He seems, I guess, slightly less genuine than Mellon. He just kind of comes across that way to me. Mm-hmm. No offense, Lou, but that's just how you come across. But he's got this little mantra on the top of his Twitter feed, like, I will never lie to anybody, I will never be mean to anybody, and integrity, everything, blah blah blah, which sounds great. So I'll take that at face value, and I assume that he's honestly trying to promote the cause of disclosure because he thinks it's important, and he thinks that I think he actually thinks that there are aliens there, and both of them I think have said words to those effects. Mm-hmm. On the show. So I think that's what's going on, is they're trying to bring on disclosure.
So you don't think it's a nefarious effort?
Well, yeah, there's all these theories. Well, I think interesting stuff, like with To the Stars Academy. If you listen to Tom DeLonge's original account of how it all started, he kind of pitched it to the military as a PR exercise for the military, mm-hmm. related to UFOs. So he got these meetings, he claims, with various high up people, and said, like, oh, this could be mutually benefits to everybody. Like, we could do these stories about UFOs and frame the military in a good light. And they're like, oh, mm-hmm. yeah, maybe. But, and then there was supposedly all kinds of Men in Black types activity going on, and who knows what actually happened. But there, I don't really know. I think the military has its fingers in the entertainment industry, and this is something that's known. I think the military gives access to films, so they can use things like they use the planes and tanks and people sometimes, and they have a degree of creative control over these films, and they're essentially using them for a number of things. One is propaganda, and the other is a recruiting tool, because the military needs to recruit people. Mm-hmm. But there is a degree of the marketing department of the military does things, and it has a budget, and it may be that there's a certain degree of the marketing department of the military helped To the Stars Academy. They got this CRADA agreement, which is another weird thing where they have supposedly access to government labs to analyze stuff. Never went anywhere, of course, because the CRADA was probably about this camouflage, active camouflage thing. Anyway, mm-hmm. something completely different. But yeah, there is a relationship there, and it's all part of the whole military, industrial, and now entertainment complex. Mm-hmm. And now To the Stars Academy has reframed itself as entirely entertainment, with very, very little to do with actual science. So what's going on there? It's kind of bizarre. I don't know what the connection is. What's the military's involvement? I don't think there's some kind of plot to distract the public with UFOs.
Okay.
And that doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're just not debunking UFO things because it's better that the experimental aircraft don't get revealed. There was obviously the thing back with the U-2 and the B-2 planes that were both very strange looking planes, and people reported seeing them, and then perhaps it's better in that instance for the UFO narrative to be real. But I don't really know, and I don't really suspect there's anything hugely nefarious going on.
Yeah. So then, I mean, going back to what you said, just trying to believe the best in people. Do you, what do you, if they're not doing it nefariously, and they truly believe what they're saying is a noble cause, where do you think where do you think their mistake is? Like, what do you think if you had to take, theorize as to what they think they're looking at, all of this information, all of this data that they've had access to through these programs over a number of years, and they've come to their hypothesis, they've come to their conclusion. Do you think they're looking at that data and deciphering it incorrectly, and then now are on this cause to make themselves look like these UFO champions, or are they doing this because, again, they really think that something is wrong here? We need to look at it, and they're in a room screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to get people to pay attention, and it's largely being ignored.
I think they think there's something going on, and where they're going wrong, where I think they're going wrong, is that they're essentially using wishful thinking instead of analytical discernment when they're looking at these pieces of evidence. They would prefer pieces of evidence that would confirm something that they already believe to be true. If you already believe that aliens are visiting the planet and that some of these sightings are aliens, then I think you're far more likely to interpret a piece of evidence as being supporting that hypothesis.
That may be so, but
simply approach it as not knowing what this piece of evidence is.
Well, look, can I stop you there for a second? Then let's just say that's accurate. That still doesn't explain, like, I mean, so you're saying they're looking at information and with all the resources that they have. I mean, look, Christopher Mellon doesn't strike me as somebody, when a nuclear weapon was lost, the person they sent to go find it was Christopher Mellon. He doesn't strike me as a person.
And a team of experts.
Yes, and a team of experts, but he doesn't strike me as a person who would go out of his way to talk about something this. And I think we can both agree this is a crazy, crazy discussion. When you step back and look at it.
Like I said, he already believes it to be true.
But why do you think
he thinks he's seen evidence, and he's been convinced by that. It's essentially the same as people who fall for some kind of conspiracy theory. I'm not saying it's the same thing. It's not like a crazy conspiracy theory. But people who fall for conspiracy theories like QAnon, for example, not the same thing, but it's just the way people believe things, is that they're kind of presented with a series of information that makes a compelling case, and then they kind of fall over kind of down the rabbit hole, essentially, and then they start believing it to be true. And once you've made that decision that you believe it to be true because someone has persuaded you, or you've seen something that you think shows it to be true, then that colors everything else. You then start seeing things in a different frame of reference. My frame of reference is that I don't think there's good evidence that there's aliens, but it would be cool if there was. But I don't think it's that likely.
Well, let me ask you this.
His frame of reference is that aliens are visiting us, and we need to get enough evidence so we can persuade everybody else that aliens are visiting us.
Let me ask you this: if I could swap jobs with you and Christopher Mellon for, say, 5 years, and we'll say from 2017 to present, do you think your opinion might be different? Because we can compare people getting information from QAnon, and I think you address it. You don't think it's a very fair comparison. I mean, to say that the data that Christopher Mellon is consuming is as inaccurate, and look, we talked about 9/11. Information could be deciphered inaccurately. People make mistakes. But I find it again hard to believe.
Let's say Christopher Mellon doesn't have a job now, but say I was to swap jobs with Marco Rubio, who I believe was, I don't know, is he's on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Senate Intelligence Committee. He's the ranking member, ranking minority member.
Yeah, ranking minority member. He was asked, like, why aren't why don't he was asked, like, you're the ranking member of the intelligence committee. Why aren't the intelligence community telling you what they know about UFOs?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I think they are telling me, and I think they don't know what they are. And I think that's what's going on in all levels of government. No one really knows that these are amazing craft. No one knows that they are doing these things. They just know that there are these reports of things, that there's this data that seems to suggest something. But they're not coming out and saying that this is actually happening. They're saying that these reports are reports of it.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, just look, I love politics. I follow politics a lot, and I pay attention to the verbiage of how politicians speak. And it would be a PR nightmare if Marco Rubio came out and said, yeah, these things are UFOs or UAPs. It would open up a can of worms for him that he probably wouldn't want. But he is
UFO. He's mentioned
extraterrestrials. He did after the question was asked. He referenced it because that was the direct question, and the response to it was, I don't know nothing about aliens. We don't know. What we do know is that A, B, C, and D. My thing is that I like to compare this discussion with the same way that medical marijuana was being discussed 25 years ago. It was a non-touchable subject politically until they added the word medical in front of marijuana. And then it took 20 years for those political winds to change, and 20 years of one senator talking about it, then another, and then another, and then Congress. And now here we are 25 years later, and it's almost legalized in all 50 states. I'm looking at this topic, this UAP topic, and I'm starting to see very, very high-level government officials, and when I say that, I mean senators, congressmen, CIA directors, House majority leaders. The political discussion on this is starting to change. And
we're going. It's this question. What is this? The political discussion on what?
On the topic of UAPs.
The topic of UAPs,
on objects floating above our military bases that we don't know what they are. Now we need to find out: are they Chinese? Are they Russian? Are they something else? And there's this, pretty. I like to think, as an American tax-paying citizen, that the dollars we're spending for defense would protect us from Chinese drones floating above our military ships or in the middle of our country observing our nuclear bases.
Sure. So, and I think it's very important.
Legitimate questions. But my point is that the political discussion is starting to be had. And my question is, why is that you say, but it is. It's they're addressing these things. As more information starts to come out.
Public. It's becoming a public discussion, and more of a public discussion, because people are bringing it up in public, and it's just something. Because of Tom DeLonge, essentially, because of all these stories.
No, come on, it's not because of Tom DeLonge. It's because Marco Rubio is
Leslie Keane.
I'm sure they have part of it is that, of course, people have to talk for things to change. But I think it's more of Marco Rubio is going into a classified briefing. He's listening to pilot testimony. He's listening to astrophysicists talk about metamaterials. He's looking at video and pictures. Yes.
How do you know that? You have zero evidence that actually happened.
Okay, so let's take that out of it. Let's take it out of it. Okay, but he's still looking at all of those other things, and he's telling the American people that there's something strange there. Right. My point is that from a political standpoint, there's zero motivation for Marco Rubio to do this. Zero.
There's plenty of motivation. I mean,
what's the motivation?
Trump had motivation to float these crazy conspiracy theories. People like it. People like the UFO thing, and it's becoming a very popular thing that people love.
But and what is that? But when he goes back to his constituency in Miami, Florida, I mean,
they're going to vote for him anyway. What's he going to do? Get voted out because he believes in UFOs?
I mean, why? If I was his political opponent, I'd probably be pointing at that. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, but he's got a safe seat, doesn't he? He's not going to get voted out. He's fine.
I mean, there's no guarantee in politics. Miami's a Florida's a pretty funny state.
It's like Donald Trump was asked if he would disavow QAnon, and he didn't. And I guess
But
he
we're not
lost,
ta-
but
we're- but
it
we're
wasn't
not
because of that.
we're not talking about Donald Trump. We're talking about Marco
No.
Rubio.
We're
I'm
talking about
I'm
like
try-
why do politicians do things is the question, really. Like,
Correct.
if there's a motivation for a politician to start talking about what they'd heard about in a classified briefing. Now,
Right.
yeah, sure. He had this briefing, and someone asked him about it, and he told what was in the briefing. I guess like the non-classified portions of it, and I don't think that's really a huge deal.
Sure, if it's only one time, but he's done it 5 or 6 times now.
You look at like the whole history of UFO investigations and UAP investigations throughout the military's history, going back to the late 1940s. It's the same type of thing. The I don't know about the politicians, but people in the military would give press conferences and talk about these investigations and said, like, we've had these things and we think we were investigating it. And then later they would say, we've investigated it and we couldn't find anything. So it's just this endless cycle of this type of thing happening. And right now we're in the start phase of an investigation into UFOs. Now we're in the waiting game portion of it. A report will come out and it will probably be just a bunch of ambiguous stuff that doesn't really show anything one way or the other, and it will maybe contain a few things like, oh, we saw this thing over the ship and we thought it was triangle shaped, but it turned out to be a bokeh. But there's other lights and we couldn't tell what they were, and that's a problem, and we need to figure out how to figure out what these things are, because they might be Chinese drones spying on us. And that's probably pretty much what you're going to get out of the report. It's just going to keep going on. It's going to keep going around. But we should probably talk about the big phone home.
Yeah.
And
I forgot to ask you how much time you have. I've just been talking to you the whole time, so I apologize if I kept you longer than normal.
Well, let's go to the end of the hour.
You got it. Yeah. Well, I mean, so okay, let's talk about the big phone home. Essentially, this is an effort to try and get more information from our representatives on this topic, because since they are talking about it, since there's a congressional report due in 180 days, and I saw your bet with Ryan Robbins over there at Post Disclosure World. I thought that was fun. Who do you think is going to win that bet, by the way?
Well, I bet on myself. So.
Right.
I was going to think I'm going to win.
Yeah.
What do I think's going to happen is just basically what I discussed there. But the issue here is should we lobby Congress, I guess, to give more disclosure? But I think the problem that I see here, and the reason I'm not behind your project, even though I admire you for doing it, because something you believe in and you're actually getting out and doing it, which is great. Is that I think we're talking about two different things in a way. There is the idea that there are weird things flying around that exhibit some kind of advanced technology, that it would be great if we could figure out what that technology was so we could use it. And if they're aliens, we can talk to them. And if it's some kind of national security threat, then we should know what it was. But then, that last little bit, the national security threat, gets into, I think, what the UAP issue really is, which is a twofold issue. Is that one, military people can't always identify what they're seeing, because it's either too far away, or it's too fast, or it's something they haven't seen before, or the technology they have doesn't show it because it's behind a hill or whatever. There are problems identifying things, and we can always be better at identifying things. And two, there are sightings of things that are unidentified, like we see lights over a military base, which might be a foreign adversary, or somebody spying on that military base, or just somebody out to do some kind of terrorist attack or something like that, which is a big security issue. And then there's other things where there's fast, high-flying planes, for example, that are unidentified, which might be some kind of new plane or some kind of new drone by a foreign adversary. And we need to, as a military, as a country, figure that out and figure out how to defend against it, and see if we can learn from it. Now, those things, though, that's all military shit. That's all classified stuff.
Right. Which we're probably not going to
tell you anything about it. What we're interested in is the anti-gravity drives. We're interested in the zero-point energy. We're interested in aliens visiting us. And if the government has information on that, then great, bring it on. But what am I going to do? Lobby the government and say, give me all your information about aliens? Because if it's something that's more
no,
mundane,
I mean,
if it's something that's
we're
technology, it's going to
no,
be a national security issue, and they're not going to tell you about it.
that's possible. Sure, I agree with you 100%. Well, not 100%, to a point.
You're not going to take your site down, though.
No, of course not. Look, there's never been a time in American history where a report of this nature has been presented to the American people and put on the table for possible discussion.
Really?
Well, I mean, you had Project Blue Book. I guess you could count that one. And
there was a few, I think.
What else you got?
I can't remember them offhand, but the one from 1947, I put a little video up on it recently, which was kind of fascinating. I didn't put it up because the audio was terrible. Ooh,
what I'm saying, well, I mean,
never mind. There's been a few.
There's been
I think there was the Condon Committee report.
Condon Committee report. I mean, we've had moments in government where you had like a Jimmy Carter, and you've had a Gerald Ford talk about the incidences in his state when he was governor. So I mean, these things are not
it's
total.
Not unprecedented.
It's not unprecedented, but then again, there's never been a. I don't think there's ever been as many people openly and without provocation coming out and just telling these stories. Like they're coming out, and
it's different, and it is, I think, largely due to this to the Stars Academy group of people, and in some ways I think that goes back to the George Knapp universe and Lazar. They're all kind of related to that, but really it's about Chris Mellon and Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLonge getting stuff out of the Pentagon. And this new one again, this new one is it's Jeremy Corbell. Yeah, Jeremy Corbell, the man who dare not speak my name. He got it from somewhere, and I guess Knapp gets things like this as well. He gets given photographs by people, similar type of thing. It's just things are getting out of the Pentagon somehow.
Yeah. Well, besides all of that, I mean, the whole point of us calling, right? Okay, and I've talked to Robert Powell over at the SCU, and there's a lot of scientists and PhDs over at the SCU that are lobbying for this information as well. And there's a couple of things we're asking for. We're not asking for them to show us aliens and bodies. So what we're asking for is, first of all, I agree with you. I think this first report is going to have a lot of things that aren't going to be very data driven, that aren't going to be good that are just going to divide us in this conversation more and get us yelling at each other more than actually bringing us together and having a logical conversation. So one of the first things I'm going to be asking for is an additional 180 days. And in the meantime, I'd like to see a preliminary report. Because with government, things move slowly. Different parts of the government, it's hard to get all of these things to coordinate and provide a report with any sort of substantive data. In the meantime, and within that 180 days, we could of course keep pressuring and keep asking for more data. But in doubling with that, the SCU also had a great idea that there could be tiers of information. Maybe information that is released to the public that is declassified, that is maybe a little older, stuff that's happened over American soil, so it doesn't put you in any sort of foreign policy trouble. And then you have another tier of information that is given to organization, for example, like the SCU. And the SCU would sign a non-disclosure agreement, and they would be able to scientifically study a different tier of data. You're laughing. Is this a stupid idea? Why are you being so damn facetious with this laugh right now?
I'm not being facetious. I'm laughing because I find it humorous.
Why is it humorous? Is it funny? Is it funny? Wait, let me ask you this, because I mean, I want to know if you're making fun of me here. Is it funny because it's a stupid idea, or is it funny because it maybe might work?
No, it's not. I guess it's not a stupid idea. But what you're talking about there is a volunteer task force, essentially. Mm-hmm. People who are like really into UFOs, studying things. So they would all have to get
not into UFOs. They're into more data. That's what they want. They want more data. They want more data on the topic about UAP phenomena.
Right. Okay, so there's people who are really into more data and they want to study it. So that, but you want them to get classified data, and so if they go through a security clearance, and they would get this, and there's this group of people. Yeah, why can't I do that? Could I get security clearance and get that data? I mean, I've done a whole bunch of studies of things.
I mean, I think
yes.
I think, well, yeah, why wouldn't you be able to if you could apply for it? You know, if you could
So
apply
could
for it
anybody apply for it then?
no,
Why the
I
SCU
think
in particular?
because there's PhDs, there's scientists, you
So
know,
any PhD should be able to get security clearance and get this. What is this the second tier or the third tier?
All right, see, now you're making fun of me. Like this
No,
is
I'm asking. Like you said, there were three tiers, so I want to know if that was the second tier or the third tier.
It's an idea. Okay, so we're just spitballing here. So just thinking of how different ways to release information, so that way the government's a little more comfortable with. Because I think what's happening, if I had to take a guess, is that maybe they are dealing with something that's unexplainable, but they can't get a lot of answers on it because they're not letting science do its job. They're not letting a whole bunch of scientists tackle this, but the double-edged sword of that is that this information, like you said, is classified. So they're not just going to start spilling the beans on all this stuff. So there's got to be a terrible idea. There's got to be a happy medium of being able to wait to open the door to science, but also make sure that they don't let any national security secrets slip, but also let them study it. And so that way, when this group comes to a conclusion, oh, hey, by the way, the footage for the Nimitz, this is the conclusions we came up with. And it turned out that, yes, it's explainable, or no, it's not. And then we can go forward with more constructive discussions as opposed to tearing people down and saying, oh, well, that's a crazy idea, or I don't think that'll work. Like nobody's ever tried this before.
Why do we need the SCU though? I mean,
I'm thinking of the SCU because they're an independent scientific coalition that wants to study UAPs, right? And it's a conglomeration of scientists. I'm not saying it has to be just the SCU. I mean, if Harvard wanted to get on this, go for it. If MIT wants to throw a couple of people into this, then go for it. I'm not limiting it to the SEU. I'm just using them as an example because I think that's a pretty damn good grouping of minds that are trying to look at something that's weird with an open mind.
Right, but we don't really know. We don't really know what this weird thing is that they would be looking at. So you're kind of asking for data, but you don't really have a grasp of, or I said not grasp, but we don't know what type of data they would be getting. It's kind of a fishing expedition.
Okay, but we're not going to know.
How do you make the case? How do you make the case that they should give us whatever it is they have? They say we're a bunch of experts. We'll pay over $20,000 each to get security clearance, and we'll take the data that you give us about the UAP phenomenon or something. And what the government gives them random data about all the lights that were seen over one military base, and then
Mick, I don't know how the nuances of this would work, right? This is just the point is that I think we're hitting a precipice of learning how to discuss this topic and learning how to release this information because again, all of this information, as we both agreed, is tied to national security secrets. So my suggestion, baby steps, Mick, baby steps. We obviously, this would have to be a slow process that we would have to figure out. But my point is just because we don't understand earthquakes doesn't mean we shouldn't put labs up and try and study and measure earthquakes. Like just because we can't predict where these things are going to be doesn't mean we shouldn't try and study and look at it. That's all.
Yeah, but it's not like there's a secret government program on earthquakes that academics don't have access to. But you're positing here that the government is hiding information because of the national security implications. And this particular band of scientists, the SCU, wants to study it, but they don't know what it is. They don't know what the data is or what the government has. It seems like, how would you formulate a request? Maybe the SCU should work on that. They should work on writing a detailed technical request for what they would do to get classified information. Maybe they should look into what it would take to get security clearance as well. But
I know they just
interesting.
They just wrote a press release, with all of their PhDs and degrees there, asking the government for more information, requesting for more and offering their help and expertise and maybe helping them decipher it.
What did they ask for though?
Well, I'd have to pull the letter. I don't have it in front of me. But my point is that the questions are being asked. You know, like what's the flip side to not asking? Do we just do nothing? We just don't ask any questions.
You go ahead and ask. But, I kind of explain what I think is going on, and I think that all the interesting information is going to be classified. Now, you talked there about a way of getting around that by the government agreeing to give the information to a group of people who get security clearance because the government isn't capable of analyzing it themselves. The military can't do it, and so the SCU, with their long track record of analyzing things, gets to do it. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's an idea that's going to go anywhere, because I think the military has a handle on what's going on. I think that there are lots of very, very smart people in the military, and if there's something happening like lights appearing over military bases, there will be a shitload of study going on within the military on how to handle that. And if you look at military research papers, there's lots of them, and lots of them are very complicated and technical, and they look into pretty obscure things. And I don't think it's at all beyond them to figure things out. What we're seeing here, though, with the SCU idea is more kind of wishful thinking, that there is some amazing nuggets of information there that if the SCU could just get their hands on, they'd be able to solve this issue and prove that there's some kind of amazing technology.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they're claiming.
Way more complicated.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think they would also agree with that. It is way more complicated than that. But I mean, well, no, that's not true. You know, I can understand the complexity of it, but my point is that we got to start somewhere. You know, like if
I think it's complicated in a mundane way.
Here's what I would like to see. Here's what I'd like to see. Those 3 videos that we got in 2017, I'd like to see radar tracking information with those. Sure, I'd like to see if there's any other ships. All of those things could be declassified. Yeah. All of those things could be asked for, and all of those things can be discussed. Those are the things. Those are the things that I'd like to request. Those are the things I think. Yeah, well, I think those are the things also that are going to be asked for by people at the SCU. You know, we want the information that we already, I guess, sort of know about, and we just want more data, so that way we can determine whether or not, you know, what we're dealing with. If it is I would just like to know if it is classified Air Force high secret technology, say it, so that way we can all get on with our lives.
But they're not going to tell you if it is.
Yeah, you don't think so, huh?
They're not going to admit the existence of a secret program, even if they don't tell you what secret program
it wouldn't have to be the admittance of a secret program. We could just be like, hey, we've done our studies, we've done our analysis and our report, and the conclusion is that people are misidentifying this with top secret flight programs that we have in the military, and we're not going to talk about it.
They can't say that, because then that gives them evidence as to what these top secret flight programs are, because people have talked about these sightings. So they know the parameters. I mean,
that's not evidence. Secret. That's not evidence. That's just saying we have.
Yeah, but the military is not going to say that Fravor's sighting was a test of a top secret drone if that's actually what it was. They're going to keep silent about it. They're going to say our policy is not to comment on ongoing investigations, or our policy is not to comment on things that may involve classified information. May or may not classify information. We can, or we neither confirm nor deny. You know, it's a standard thing. They can't. You know, it's like if someone has a surprise gift for you, and you say, "Well, is it made of glass? Did it cost more than $50?" You can narrow it down by asking them questions, and if they keep saying no, eventually you'll hit on something. And the military knows that if they answer any questions about a topic, then people are going to get closer to the answer. So they have a strict no comment policy, because there's classified stuff involved. So they're not going to tell you that, even if it was an actual secret program.
Yeah. I mean, then why release video? Why talk about it?
Release the video,
or why confirm the video then?
Because they explained why they confirmed the video, because people were asking them all the time about, was it real video, and was there any more video? So they said, we're officially releasing it. It's real video, and there isn't any more video. And so they thought that no one would be asking them more questions. Of course, there was a media tsunami, and then they realized this, and now they're just not answering any questions. Yeah. So because they're just tired of people talking to them. They've got important things to do. Yeah, for you and the other people in the UFO community, this seems like the most important topic ever. This
to the
technology.
military,
but to the military, it's a small thing. It's
I don't think
the Chinese government flying drones over their bases, which is it's a big thing, sure.
Mick, let's be
but
straight
it's
here.
just a security issue.
Mick, let's be straight. I don't think this is the most important, the number one thing on the military's issue, because if it was, it'd be bigger than a $22 million budget for 5 years. Okay, so I agree with that. Okay, but
it's nothing.
But it's nothing. You're absolutely right. It's not even a drop in the bucket. Okay, but it's still $22 million of taxpayer money to look at a topic that is, from what we can see, pretty strange. And I think if the government is even spending $10 million to look in on this, there's got to be a reason why. Why would they? Again, they're busy. Why even make this department? Why even put that money? $22 million, you could spend that on 22 million other things for the military that they don't need to do this. So again, why?
Well, maybe Harry Reid was persuaded that it was a good idea by his friend Rob Bigelow, because they're both of like mind when it comes to UFOs. Now, of course, they both deny this, but there's the proximity. It wasn't just a pure coincidence that Bigelow gets the contract to do this and got most of the $22 million. It's not. I'm sure they could say it's just a coincidence, but it's not. So I think, like in many things in government, there's a degree of pork barrel spending. People do things to benefit their constituents. They do local projects. They build bridges to nowhere. Bigelow is Reid is a senator for Nevada, and he got money for a company in Nevada to do something, essentially.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I guess I got your viewpoints here, and it seems like, from what I gather, and I don't want to just, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it, and everybody's kind of wasting their time. Like what are we doing here?
Say that.
What are we doing here? Like, why even have the
something to it?
I mean, there's
unidentified sightings, that's a problem. If there are unidentified aircraft flying over military bases, that's a big problem. So there's something to it. There's something to the phenomena.
Right.
But I don't think there's aliens to it. I don't think there's like super advanced technology to it, because there isn't really much evidence of that. But UAPs are an issue. They're a big issue. The UAP task force, I don't know exactly how serious it is, but it's talking about a real problem of things that are unidentified and fly. It's an issue. Chinese drones spying on us. It's an issue.
So where do you think this topic's going to be in 20 years? Where do you think Mick West will be in 20 years?
In 20 years, we're going to have a lot more AI, which I think is going to play a part in all aspects of life. And I think we will have a lot more things like AI drones, AI planes, AI data collection, and AI analysis of that. And so you'll have things like, we have the Sky Hub program, where people are trying to set up cameras and then develop AI for figuring out where things are in the sky. I think the military will have things like that. They'll have surveillance programs that can detect, what's going on in great detail and triangulate it and things like that. And I think if something is out there, we will discover it. But I think what we're going to find is just more of the same. We're going to see advancements in drone technology and unmanned aerial vehicle technology, and we're going to see advancements in AI, and the way things can fly will be a lot more dramatic because we don't have humans inside the planes. And it'll just be essentially the same thing. I don't think we're going to see a big leap in technology in terms of hyperspace and warp drives and anti-gravity. I don't think we're going to see evidence of aliens, but I think we'll see some definitely interesting advances in technology. And I think the UFOlogy sphere will have developed the same amount between 2021 and 2041 as it did between 2001 and 2021.
All right. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's leave on this, because I thought it would have been a fun experiment. Just because I was running a little experiment as we were having our conversation, just because I thought it'd be fun. And that was how many times I agreed with Mick West versus how many times Mick West agreed with me. And so And I'm sure this is wrong. There's no science in this. I'm trying to do a show as we're talking about it, but I agreed with Mick West 14 times during our conversation. Mick West agreed with me twice. Twice. So
does that mean I'm disagreeable, or does it mean I'm right?
Well, that's for the people to decide, and I think time will tell. And as more information comes down the pipe, sir, of course, I'd always love to engage you in conversations, because I think you're an enlightening man. And as some people pointed out here, you're probably doing backflips around me. Maybe I'm not intellectually understanding 100% with some of these arguments you're coming from, but I try my best, and I wanted to, highlight, your viewpoints and see if there's any common ground we can get of. And
it was a great conversation, I thought.
And I know you probably don't think my idea is very worthwhile, but we're going to try and get you more data, Mick West.
It's fine. It's just not something I personally think
that's
going
fine
to yield any results, but props to you for trying it.
We're going to give it a shot. There's never been a time in American history where people have been on the same day calling for more information. So
just,
who
take
knows?
my name off that poster that you
No, of course we will. Of course we will. And so with all of that said, Mr. West, thank you for stopping by. I truly appreciate it. Before you go, is there anything you'd like to tell the people where they can find your work? Are you working on a new book?
I'm thinking about a book on UFOs.
Okay.
So some of the stuff I'm doing essentially is research for that. And interesting. Yeah. UFOs is a story of technology and people, and society. So it's fascinating stuff, and science and math and stuff as well, which isn't fascinating to everybody. So it's an interesting blend of topics that appeals to a certain nerdy and mostly male demographic.
Fair enough. One last question. I'm sorry, I just thought of it. Is there any scientist on this topic that you've listened to speak about it that has impressed you with their analysis of this topic?
None that spring to mind, though. I'm sure there might have been, but scientists like don't talk about this topic because it's they from my perspective, they have better things to talk about. From other people's perspective, they're too scared to do it because it's a no topic. But it's not something that's viewed as being science by a lot of people. There's this issue of the demarcation between science and pseudoscience, and a lot of people think that UFOs are pseudoscience when there is a lot of actual science in there in terms of determining what objects actually are. So it'd be good if more scientists did get into it. But no.
Okay. Maybe next time when you come back, we could lightly talk about J. Allen Hynek and Avi Loeb. I think those are two guys that spring to mind. But that's I think I can see your brain just going like this and a million miles an hour on all the arguments of why that guy's an idiot. Okay.
We'll talk about that some other time.
Other time. All right. Well, Mr. West, I truly, seriously appreciate your time. You're welcome back anytime. I hope this was a fun conversation for you. I hope everyone in the chat enjoyed it. And again, please, you didn't say where can people find your information?
I am Mick West, so you can just look up Mick West.
Just Google.
On Twitter, I am at Mick West. On Facebook, I am Mick West. And YouTube, I am Mick West. And I have MickWest.com if you want to get the whole kit and caboodle.
Yep. So
and Metabunk, of course.
And Metabunk. Yeah. Well, I got your Metabunk right here. I thought you had your Twitter here, but anyway. All right, Mr. West, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Fascinating conversation.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. All right, you guys. All right. So we got Mick West. We had Mick West on the show. Thank you guys, man. There was a lot of people in this chat today. A lot of people in this show. V, Solar Marshal, UAP or SAP. I didn't get to read all your comments. V, all of you guys, thank you so much for being here. And I know some of you disagreed with me. I saw some of you found this boring. I'm sorry. I've never talked to Mick West. I wanted to know about Mick West, sort of where he comes from. He's sometimes can be a little smug. Yeah, I can agree with that. But the guy's got a viewpoint. I'm not gonna change his smugness. That's not the point of this conversation. The point was to just see if there's any what his how hardlined he was on his opinion or on his viewpoint. And I think from what I gather, it's pretty hardline. I mean, I like to think that people are open-minded. People, are open and receptive to more data. I'm not as receptive as I hope he was going to be, but he doesn't think we're going to get very far, and he's entitled to his opinion, but we don't know until we try, so I'm not going to let anyone pee on my parade, so to speak. But I did find it interesting that, as much as I tried to agree with him, as much as I tried to support his viewpoints, there wasn't a whole lot of that coming back from the other side. And that's, hey, that's, if you're going to have a conversation where both people can be, can be agreeable, and, because not everything I'm saying is wrong. Not everything he's saying is wrong, so we got to find a middle. And that was the whole point of the conversation. So you guys, I appreciate it. Thank you, John Poe. Thank you everyone who's been here. If you guys have any questions, we do have another live stream. I should probably end this show. We got another live stream in 3 hours with the Undead Gaucho, which is a completely different shifting of gears. So you guys, if you enjoyed the conversation, please check back in 3 hours. Thank you so much for dealing with the technical issues we had right at the beginning of the show. Holy cow, that was crazy. So I'm glad we were able to fix it. I'm glad you guys stuck around, found the new link, and you guys joined us in for it. So kudos to all of you out there. Thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with me here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review with today's guest, Mick West. Of course, before you go, smash the like button if you enjoyed the show. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and ring that bell. That way you can join us on April 24th, 2021, when we call Congress and our local state representatives and request more transparency, request more data, request more information on this UAP topic, because, they're talking about it. So we might as well ask for it. So with all of that said, you guys, thank you so much. See you in 3 hours. See you in 3 hours. All right. Peace.
Unidentified. Unidentified.